Collaboration really is at the heart of what we do at MAP. And I think collaboration is so important because it's important for us to share. Share not only collections, but to share knowledge, to share ideas, to share personnel, to share skills, because the world then becomes so much richer for that.
Hello, and welcome to the Anahita Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India, celebrating stirring stories of empowerment, struggle, and success from women professionals in different fields across the globe. Stories we hope are bound to inspire young professionals. I'm Hiral Datwani, currently with the Communications and Development team at Carnegie India. Today, we're delighted to welcome Kamini Sawhney, the first director of the Museum of Art and Photography, MAP, in Bangalore. With her passion for art and culture, Kamini has brought together a young, inspired team to create a new museum experience for audiences in India. In her earlier role, Kamini served as the head of the Jahangir Nicholson Art Foundation, Mumbai, formerly known as the Prince of Wales Museum. Kamini's journey also includes a successful career as a journalist and television anchor, where she reported on a wide range of events, from politics to culture, as the bureau chief of NDTV Mumbai. Thank you for your time, ma'am. Coming on to my first question, could you take us through your early journey as a journalist and shed light on your transition from media to art and culture? Were there any early experiences or influences that shaped your love for art and photography and eventually led you to pursue a career in this field?
I first began actually my journalistic career with Doordarshan when Bhaskar Ghosh was at that time uh, the Director General of Doordarshan, and he wanted to do a professional kind of recruitment. So here all of us came on into a government institution hoping to change things, and we really were able to do quite a bit when he was heading the institution. Um, and it also taught us to work with a lot of challenges because, as you can imagine, reporting news is something that's quite political. And at the same time, there were so many pulls and pushes. I think we developed resilience, we developed the ability to balance many changing factors. And then what was most exciting was actually working on election news coverages. And that was when I first interacted with Pranoy Roy when I reported for him from Doordarshan for the first election coverage that he did from Bihar. And when he started a daily a daily news channel, he invited me to join, and that's when really it opened up whole avenues for me. It was so exciting. This was the first time that actually journalists were going out and asking questions that mattered, especially on television. People were so used to government kind of news that they had received so far. And NDTV was really a place for excellence. It pushed us to perform to the best of our ability. It was work 24/7. I never knew when I'd be back home or whether I'd be back home that night. There could be people for dinner, but I would have to maybe fly to Latur because there was an earthquake, or maybe have to fly to Nepal because there had been a disaster there. It was just an exciting life, and the unpredictability was even more exciting. And I came to Bombay at a time when I took over in Bombay. It was changing. Bombay was changing so dramatically. The Shiv Sena had just come into power. This was after the Babri Masjid demolition and the riots that followed, and then the bomb blasts. So there was a lot happening. There was this nexus between the building and the underworld and the building lobbies. So it was a place of great churn. Lots of things were happening. It was an exciting moment, and I learned so much.
That sounds very exciting, like very different from I think what you're doing currently. But I wanted to know more about your experience with the Brooks Fellowship. Like, I'm sure it must have been enriching. I mean, how did it contribute to shaping your personal vision and your approach in the world of art and culture?
I did forget to tell you how I moved actually from journalism into the arts. And so my husband was posted out of the country, and of course, I had to move. We moved into South Asia, to Jakarta, and to Thailand, and of course, Prannoy from NETV kept told me to go ahead and report from there when anything happens. But nobody in India is really interested in news from Thailand and Indonesia unless there's an earthquake or there's a tsunami. And it gave me time to pursue other passions and interests, and that's when I began to explore art, which was always a great love for me. I'd grown up surrounded by the arts. And, um, and then when I came back to India, journalism had changed in ways that it was difficult for me to imagine myself in this space. And so I decided that I would just take a career jump. And I started studying again. I went back to school. I took a course on museology and art conservation at the Prince of Wales in Bombay. I studied Indian art and aesthetics, art criticism and theory, equipped myself for a different career, and there I was in the arts.
That, I mean, picking up a different career route after you've established yourself in a space, I'm sure it must have been a difficult decision for you as well. But
Yeah,
yeah,
the decision wasn't so difficult as actually the adjustment to a completely new field in a
yeah,
professional sense.
makes sense. But coming on to my second question, like, could you
Question.
tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more on the Brooks Fellowship and something that you picked up from that experience?
Yeah, the Brooks Fellowship happened about 4 years into my time at the Jahangir Nicholson Art Foundation at the CSMVS where I was working. And it was a wonderful opportunity because it was a joint fellowship supported by Elizabeth and Rory Brooks. And it was a first fellowship, the first iteration of that fellowship. And they had three people from India. And it was a collaboration between Tate and the Delphina Foundation in London. And what was wonderful was this combination of experiences that it gave us, because the Delphina Foundation was a smaller art space, a more informal art space, where a lot of artists came in, different people from the art world. And we would have these chats around the table, around dinner and lunch, around food, where all of us were able to share experiences, and that was a wonderful learning as well as a wonderful way to meet new people. And the Tate was an incredible experience at that time in my career because it opened up whole new worlds for me and different ways of approaching art. And the Tate was so generous in the way in the learning that they extended, because I was really invited to attend all their meetings, including their acquisition meetings. So it gave you some idea of what were the systems and processes in place. Their curatorial meetings were again an incredible source of knowledge for me and learning. And I remember going to one meeting which was headed by Nick Sarota, who was then the overall director for both of the Tates. And they had 18 departments that were reviewing an exhibition that had just closed at the Tate. I think it was Matisse. And the whole process of going through listening to every department to see how had the exhibition played out over the period that it was open to the public, how was everyone inputting, what was the learning, what went right, what went wrong, what can they take forward for the next exhibition. So it was, I think, a great learning experience for me, and I'm always grateful to the Tate for the generosity that they showed to me.
I'm sure that, having that experience might have helped you set the culture for MAP in Bangalore, because from what I've read and what I've, heard about MAP, its key principle is working collaboratively with the global museum community, and it reflects in your work. So, what have been your learning from these collaborative efforts, and how do you believe various institutions and organizations can flourish from such a collaborative culture?
Collaboration really is at the heart of what we do at MAP. And I think collaboration is so important because it's important for us to share. Share not only collections, but to share knowledge, to share ideas, to share personnel, to share skills, because the world then becomes so much richer for that. And it's wonderful. We are a new museum. We are still learning, and I am grateful again to so many more established institutions who responded when we reached out because we wanted to learn for them. We wanted to work with them so that we improved and we upped our game. And we've had so many programs where we've collaborated with. The earliest one was Museums Without Borders that developed at the time of the pandemic, when people and objects could not travel. And we said, let us make them do that virtually. And so it juxtaposed an object from MAP with an object from a partner museum. And when you bring these two objects into conversation across geographies, across themes, um, you get some very rich conversations that were articulated by the curators from either side. And so the idea was to actually show how much we benefit, how much we have in common, and to start this conversation going between museums. There have been so many other collaborations that we've done. We live in the tech capital of the country. And so we said, why don't we tap into this resource, for example? And so we approached Accenture, and they responded in kind and created for us a 3D persona of one of our most iconic artists, M.F. Hussain, using artificial intelligence. And we felt that was a great way for young people to be able to interact with an artist who is no more and whom people probably don't know about. So it's really a kind of 3D persona that they chat with. They ask him questions and he responds. So those are some of the collaborations we've done. We've collaborated with the Wellcome Trust on the Mindscapes project. So there are many institutions that we've collaborated with, and we've been so much the richer for that working together.
That sounds very fun, like a digital archive of, presenting an artist's work like that, especially during the pandemic where there was so much worry going on. I'm sure people would have really appreciated such a resource. But could you tell us about some unique exhibitions or collections that MAP has curated? Or maybe, something that highlights the museum's
Yeah.
commitment to presenting a range of artistic voices?
Okay, first let me tell you about the collections of MAP actually, because we have 6 categories. It's loosely divided into these. It has pre-modern art, it has modern and contemporary, textile craft and design, photography, indigenous art and popular culture. And I think what's really special about MAP is most museums have, say, classical art, perhaps, and modern and contemporary, but very few have indigenous art or popular culture. And the idea was to collapse these hierarchies between what is perceived as high and low art and to draw connections across the collection so that when people come into the museum, they see, there's a part of my life reflected in this space. And they're able to connect. And so one of the exhibitions I think that is important is the permanent exhibition that we have at MAP called Visible Invisible, representation of women in art through the MAP collection. And we decided that usually permanent exhibitions have the highlights of the collection, but we decided that it's important, besides showing the highlights of the collection, to also pick up on issues that are important to the community. And so we decided to explore gender issues because we felt that there were many factors that prompted us to do this. One, of course, was the fact that in 2020, women had really fallen out of the labor force. They were down to 20%. Little girls had fallen out of the education system. It was the time of the pandemic. And a study by Statista.com told us that India was the most dangerous country for women to be in, based on a whole set of parameters. So we said this was an important issue that we should focus on. And so Invisible really looked at the paradox of how visible women have been in art over the centuries, but how invisible they are in the public domain. And while they may have been the central subject of art, They had very little agency over the nature of that representation because the image builders were largely male.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one of the exhibitions I think that we really try to raise issues that were important. And the exhibition is not seen as an end in itself. It's seen as a start of a whole process. We hope it will be a catalyst for change because it does not lecture people. Instead, it raises a series of questions that ask you to think about preconceived notions that we may have inherited or patriarchal norms that we take for granted, and to ask and to activate a kind of change, a social change, a cultural change, using art.
That sounds very interesting. I might have a follow up question on that. Like, from what you've just shared with us, what role do you think women have in the art and history space? Like, especially, how can women flourish in this space, or like artists as museum curators? How women as subjects are portrayed through art history and culture? Can you tell us a bit more on that?
Yeah, I think for example, if you look at how women are portrayed in art, it usually reinforces certain stereotypes.
Yeah,
Yeah, or it's usually the male gaze that's representing.
yeah,
So we just take these for granted. We don't question them. For example, if you look at the mother and child, that is that is an image that has been used not only in India but across cultures.
yeah.
So the mother and child always represents the male child. So the question we're asking is, where is the female child in all this? She's not. She doesn't figure. She rarely figures, and so we describe this as the violence of invisibility. When you invisibilize a part of your population so that they don't even enter your consciousness. And we also through this exhibition we really looked at how despite the kind of representation of women, we look at also struggle and resistance, how women artists who had been on the fringes of the art movement for many years, despite the amazing work that they had done, innovative work that they had done, they slowly began to find agencies. So during the 70s, they began to find a voice. They emerged from the margins to take hold of the narrative, and then to start telling us how they perceive themselves, how they would like to be perceived. And I think there's incredible work today being done by so many women artists that is really moving the needle on attitudes, on perspectives, and how we view uh, the whole creative field and what's being produced today. And I think that was started by the Gorilla Girls when they the first asked this question: does a woman have to be naked to enter the Met?
Yeah.
And the fact that women artists were hardly represented in collections across the world or in exhibitions across the world, and we are seeing such a change now. And I think that's really hope for the better, because we are seeing women find agency and far better able to represent their point of view, and we're seeing far more work as well in the space.
Thank you. I think that aptly explained what I was trying to understand. But since we're talking about change, and I would say the heat of change that is here now, is the digital wave that is happening. So, in an increasingly digital world, how does MAP leverage technology and digital platforms to engage audiences and make art more accessible, as you've told us earlier? And did the pandemic offer any valuable insights as the museum transitioned into a digital realm, as you shared with us?
You know, MAP, I must tell you, launched first as a digital space, as a digital platform, as a digital museum in December of 2020. And that was when the pandemic had just hit, and all of us were quite stunned, as the rest of our colleagues were, and we were not quite sure of the way forward. And then, in our discussions with our board and our advisors, the feedback that we constantly kept getting was, why are you so fixated on a physical museum? Why don't you just go online where the conversation is? And so that's what we decided to do. Of course, it was a mad scramble to try and get there, because we had about 6 months to do this. And so far, we were preparing for a physical space. So it meant acquiring a whole new set of skills and creating different pathways. But we actually did that in December of 2020. We launched, and the world was our oyster because it really opened up completely new audiences for us that we would never have been able to welcome into the physical space. And I think what it also did was it changed that equation between the museum and the audience. Because so far, it was the museum that was the dominant voice in this conversation. But MAP has always wanted to have a far more interactive relationship with our audiences, where we understand the knowledge and that exists within the community, and we are able to see that the relationship is more cultural exchange rather than the museum holding forth on what was important. And I think technology really helped us do that. It helped us bridge that gap, and it provided us new ways with alternate ways for people to experience art. So because we launched first as a digital museum, we were able to incorporate all those experiences within the physical space. For example, if you walk into Map now, you'll actually see all these interactive floor to ceiling screens. And people are able to access the collection. Anything that's digitized at Map is available on there. You're able to look at the metadata, you're able to zoom into an image. And if you scan a QR code, you can actually download it on your phone or your laptop. So the idea is to use technology to be completely accessible to people. So we have a whole range of digital experiences within the museum. For example, we have the Saskin Gallery, which pulls up a whole lot of curated digital exhibitions that people can actually see, because there's a lot of artwork that's not available on display in the physical spaces. So how do people access that? For example, how do they access the Jamini Roy collection at MAP? So that's available on the screens around you that come up at the click of a button. You can pull up a whole lot of exhibitions at the museum. Yeah. We have in the lower ground floor, we actually have a whole other range of digital experiences like holo tours, which take you on heritage sites that have been shot in 3D, and so you actually feel as if you're walking through these sites. We have the MF Hussain experience. We also have the holo table, where you can pull up again objects in 3D. We use the photogrammetry to actually take a huge number of images of objects. So about 300 images are stitched together to act so that people can actually see what that object looks like. It's a 3D version of the object. So you don't really miss things that are not on display at MAP. You can actually see them through our digital experiences.
That sounds very fun and interesting how technology can leverage art and culture like that. But taking a break from the serious questions, I would want to know if there is a hidden talent or a hobby that might have been your career if not for MAP.
I don't know about a hidden talent, but certainly a passion was music. And I grew up learning music. I was surrounded by the arts. My mother was a great a singer and a theater person. She sang Western classical music, and so we grew up with music around us. We were always at festivals, at theater, at concerts, and so I studied music. I studied the piano actually, and actually did the Trinity College exams that you had up to the eighth grade, and then once I got married and moved away, all of that went. And yeah, so we were all part of theater. So I used to be on stage singing for musicals that we had. So there were these, I acted in things like Fiddler on the Roof and the Pirates of Penzance, and it was all a lot of fun. So I would call it more a passion than anything more.
That's interesting. That's a very different angle to things that you're doing right now.
Yeah.
I was actually reading up on the work that you've done, and I came across your work at the UNDP, where you worked on a project promoting artisan development as a sustainable model. Could you tell us a bit more about this experience and maybe about the impact that it had on the artisan's way of life?
Okay, so I was at that time working with Doordarshan, and there was this program called PADSA. It was a program on artisan development in South Asia, and a colleague of mine or a friend, a person I knew, Shantam Seth, was working on this, and they had already finished phase one of the project on artisan development, and during the second phase, they really felt they needed someone who was good at media planning and communications, and how they could develop that and use that element in the project phase that they were working on. And so they invited me and another colleague of mine at Doordarshan to actually spend a year with them working on that project as part of the media team. And it was very rewarding because it was really looking at how do they support a certain way of life that was environmentally friendly and ecologically sustainable, and how did you support the artisan in a way of life that was fast disappearing, because it was a way of earning a livelihood that not only looked at earning money, but it also looked at a way that it was a social network that it created, where the artisan was one part of a thriving community, and it was not only a source of income but also a way of an outlet for creativity. Yeah, and that kind of creativity was really food for the soul, right? So to me, that really resonated because I thought the artisan really creates work that's not only aesthetically pleasing, but also sustainable.
Yeah.
And why were we moving away from a model that had worked so well? Why in this country were we so indifferent to culture and heritage that the rest of the world was amazed by? But art in India is really a way of life. It's art is in the drape of our sari, in the rangoli that we do outside our homes, in the way we decorate our little shrines in our home. So why is it that that connection seems to have snapped? And to me, that was very important to try and reestablish that connection. And I hope that working in a museum will help us do that, because we are trying to build a museum going culture. Most people, if you ask them, where would you like to go? Would you like to go to the theater, or would you like to go to the mall or to a museum? I don't see anyone breaking down the doors to enter the museum. So, how do we get people to say, this is an exciting space? This is a space where I want to be, where I learn something, and I have fun. And that's what we're trying to do through a museum and through art.
That sounds very inspiring, and I'm sure that shift will come with time. I mean, I think already from my generation at least, everybody's just so excited to enter and understand this space more, because obviously it's become more accessible, more people are talking about it. But like, talking on that, as a director of MAP, what are your goals and vision for the museum going ahead? Like, do you envision further enriching the museum experience for audiences in India and beyond?
You know what? I'd always like to say that MAP should be a space of excellence. When people come to MAP, they should feel that, yes, this is a great space where where anything that is presented here is exciting, it's innovative, it's edgy, it's the best. But really, my long-term goal for MAP is, how do we create a space that is both inclusive and accessible for everyone? We live in a society where there are huge gaps, huge hierarchies that are still in space, that have created huge social and economic inequalities. So, in that environment, how do we create a space that is inclusive and accessible to everybody? And that really is the goal that I'm looking for. How does a person with disability feel welcome at MAP? And that's why when we sat down with our architects and with our consultants, DEOC, or the Diversity and Equal Opportunities Center, we said, how do we make MAP a space that is welcoming not only for people with physical disabilities, but also people with certain mental conditions?
Yeah.
Besides the ramps that you have and the support bars, what is the kind of surfaces that you use in our building? What are the surfaces for our elevators, for example? What are the kinds of lights that you use? Um, we also have a quiet room for people who are disturbed, perhaps, and who need some time to calm down and then come back and join the space. Our online space also looks at how we can be inclusive. We have what are the kind of fonts that we use, the color contrasts. We have alt text. We have Indian Sign Language interpretation. So everyone feels that this is a space that they can come in and enjoy. But most of all, also, this space needs to be relevant to everybody.
Right.
What is the language that we use? How are people able to communicate? How are the people able to understand the stories that we tell? Unless young people find this is a space that's relevant for them, they're not going to be at MAP. So, really, it's looking at how does everyone feel, yes, this represents a part of my life here. There's, when I come into MAP, there is something that I learned today. There is something that I can take away. There is something that touched my heart. We really want people to experience the transformative power of the arts at MAP.
That is very thoughtful. I mean, when I was looking up math and I was trying to read about the kind of work that you're doing, I actually saw the sign language interpretation in one of your videos, and I was moved. Like, I had never thought a museum would do something like that. So I'm looking forward to coming to Bangalore very soon and see how map has, evolved maybe in the next few months. But coming on to my last question, more so for young women like me who are now entering the workforce, do you have any advice for us, like, somebody who wants to break into the art and culture space, or in general, any advice for young people out there?
I wouldn't presume to advise anybody because we are all learners, and I think I have as much to learn from young people today as I have to learn from anybody else. But when we sat down in the beginning, we were thinking, how do we get young people into this space? Young people, that was what gripped us a lot of the time. It was a big worry, but I'm happy to say that young people are pouring in. And I actually had a session with them the other day to say, what is bringing you into MAP? Why are you coming into MAP? What can we do to make sure that you enjoy your experience here? And I think it was interesting to see that um, different ways that people reacted, but it was not the digital experiences, surprisingly, that people responded to, but the fact that it was art, it was the art that they saw. They felt proud of their country, they felt proud of their heritage, and they liked the stories that we tell. Yeah. So my appeal to young women is to come in, participate in what your country has to offer. This is your wealth. This is your cultural wealth. So preserve it, enjoy it, and use it.
To me, that was a very unique and insightful conversation. So, thank you. They say, as you've said in a previous interview, the best introduction to art is to stroll through a museum, and I will certainly acquaint myself to understand this space better. So, thank you again, Kamini ma'am, for being with us here today and sharing such valuable words.
Thank you, Hero. That was a lovely conversation.
To our audience, we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Do visit Carnegie India's YouTube channel to access all the episodes of the Anahita Speaker Series. Thank you and see you next month.